As MSMEs face both challenges and incredible opportunities in today's market, this conclave aims to equip you with actionable insights, connect you with industry leaders, and inspire solutions that drive growth. Our first speaker of the day is Pranav Pai, a visionary in startup VC funding and managing large asset bases, who will be sharing his vision on India's startup nation, our generational leap towards $10 trillion GDP. Pranav is a founding partner and chief investment officer of 314 Capital. He leads investments and portfolio construction at 314 Capital. As CIO, he has led over 70 seed and venture capital investment across several investment categories in India and US. Pranav is deeply involved with the startup ecosystem in India. He served as a co-president of Stanford Angels and Entrepreneurs India and national vice chairman of the All India Management Association Young Leaders Council. Pranav received 35 Under 35 award from Entrepreneurs Magazine India and 40 Under 40 Alternative Investment Professionals of India award from Association of International Wealth Management of India. He is also on GQ list of 25 most influential young Indians 2021. Pranav graduated with masters in electrical engineering from Stanford University. Over to you, Pranav.
Good morning, everyone. It's great to be here. Namaskara. I was very happy to hear Mr. Ullas Kamath sir talk about my speech again. I've tried to change this from the last conclave I was a part of. Some of you may have seen my presentation in the previous conclave we had. What I'll talk about over the next 40 to 45 minutes is what we see from our point of view as investors, what is changing in India, why are these startups working, why is suddenly there's so much enthusiasm in the world about the Indian markets, how come so many IPOs are happening, how come so many startups are suddenly worth 10,000 crores. There's a logic behind all of this. It has come at great cost, great pain, great sacrifice. As like anything else in India, we've been through a lot. I'll also give you some historical context about why that's important, why that should serve as every young founder's motivation. And for those of you who are now very senior, you'll have more memories about pain than us younger people will. Why the last 10, 20, 30 years of your career, you should think differently about what you can achieve. What we're going to see in the next 10 years, we will never see again as a country. And therefore, this is why we call it a generational opportunity in front of us. I'll start with maybe the most recent global case study that all of us went through very recently. COVID exposed many things about the world, that countries actually don't trust each other very much, that actually our systems are quite brittle. Something as simple as a virus can transmit across the whole world in less than a week and become a problem that every government individually is confused about, but as a group, they all confuse each other and then confuse us. So it becomes a cascading nightmare of uncertainty. But one thing is for sure, every country, however they responded, some countries' vaccines didn't work. Thankfully, our country's vaccines worked. One thing they all did in common was they printed an absurd amount of money. And when central banks print money like this, at this volume, $19 trillion by the last count, we stopped counting after a while. $19 trillion means all this money has to end up somewhere, because money, as you know, is only valuable if it flows. A store of money is useless, especially when it's not backed by anything, not even gold anymore. So as this money flows and comes into the rest of society, it eventually comes into the markets. And what you see is, especially in the US, which is the largest equity market in the world, is worth, I think, 57 trillion now. 57 trillion is more than 10 times the GDP of India. This will give you a sense of how large 57 trillion is. You start seeing the equity markets acting as a voting mechanism, right? So when you buy a stock, you are, as an individual retail investor, you're voting in favor for that stock, that the stock will go up, hopefully. That's your vote in favor of that stock. And if you sell the stock or you go short, you're voting against it. So what we saw is everyone here is use Zoom. You probably didn't hear of Zoom before COVID, and suddenly Zoom is on everyone's phone and laptop. And of course, the public markets become a little too enthusiastic. They think everyone is going to use Zoom. We'll never fly again. The world is sunk. No one will travel again. And therefore, unanimously, all the airline stocks are shorted at the same time. Of course, this turned out to be a bad assumption. A few years after COVID's recovery, we've seen this in real time. Zoom has crashed 92% from its high in 2021. All these airline stocks are back to record highs because everyone is now revenge traveling. Everyone is traveling, spending money they don't have, borrowing to take a vacation. So now we are overcorrecting in the other direction. But that being said, what you saw across the world, even in India, you saw this a lot in our public markets, is that the voting mechanism is very real. And now all of us are investors every day. And this is a very important point I want you to take away. Yes, you are founders, you are CAs, you are lawyers, you are operators, you are businessmen, you are bankers. You play different roles every day. But besides being Indian, besides being in Bangalore today, besides being a lot of things, part of the same community, one thing unites us all more than everything else is we also now have capital to allocate. We're all investors. So I invite you now to think with your investor hat on. And I'm going to challenge some of the assumptions you have about why these companies are worth what they're supposedly worth in the public markets today. Some of the facts I'm going to share with you are a little disturbing. They will challenge and shock you a little bit, but that's fine. Remember, you're wearing your investor hat. All you care about is how do I make money from this, right? So let us go inside by inside, slide by slide, and see how, in spite of reality being confusing, contradictory, sometimes two truths are both true at the same time and they contradict each other, we can still profit from the battle of truths, battle of ideas as investors and make returns for ourselves. So after COVID, what has unnaturally happened is the whole thinking about market cap has shifted to tech. You would have heard of Fang Man, Fat Man, GAFA, Magnificent Seven. Now Netflix is no longer the N in that acronym. It's become NVIDIA. NVIDIA is now worth almost $3 trillion. So now these 7 or 8 big tech companies, they've become global monopolies. And what has happened is, as this recovery happens post-COVID, all of us are living in this recovery in real time. Some industries have not recovered. Some industries continue to struggle. And some industries have recovered, bounced back, gone up so high, even if they correct 10%, 20%, the catch-up is now near impossible. And even in the same sector, you will see 2 companies following different strategies. Maybe one is more digital, one is less, or maybe one, the CEO speaks better, he looks nicer, smiles with a little bit more straight teeth than the other guy. The market you start seeing a divergence in the stock. Always remember to be on the upward trajectory. That part of the K is your friend, that part of the K is where you make money. If you know how to short, if you know FNO, you know which direction of the K you have to short. And therefore, the fundamental assumptions of which companies are going to be winners, which companies are going to be on the right side of the K whenever an event happens, whenever a response has to happen, and therefore you have to vote in which company's favor and which direction it will go. Remember that now the whole world is digital. A majority of the human species is now on the internet, is now on smartphones, is now on digital, on social media. And that is now reflecting in which companies' stocks are becoming the most valuable all over the world. Again, let's look at the US market over the last 100 so years. In 1917, you will see a lot of companies that look very similar to the biggest companies in India. Steel, cement, telephone, auto, some defense, boring. In 1967, you saw the first tech company, IBM. Some of you may remember IBM. The computers used to be as big as this room. There used to be one famous IBM computer. The first one in Bangalore was in IISc. But IBM became the first tech company and became very quickly the most valuable company in the equity markets. In 2017, I noticed something strange. I was starting out my career investing. We were a few years into 314. I called my friends in New York and asked them, it looks like Apple is going to become the first $1 trillion tech company. Do you think Apple is really worth $1 trillion? And they were laughing back then. They were saying, there's no way Apple is worth $1 trillion. It's a silly bubble. Trump has just come. Everyone is behaving strangely. This will not last. We are shorting Apple. Turns out they were wrong. Apple went on to become more than 3 times that 2017 valuation. It went to 3 trillion. And Apple, as you've seen, Microsoft, Google, Alphabet, etc., have only compounded up since. In 2022, 2023, we saw something even scarier. 9 out of the 10 top companies are now tech or tech adjacent. The only non-tech company there is Berkshire Hathaway, which, if you know, that's Warren Buffett. And if you know a little bit more about him, his company holds the shares of the other companies on the top, so it's just a proxy to the other 9 anyway. So something strange is happening as we speak in real time. The stuff that we used to value, banks, cement, steel, retail, auto, fashion, apparel, those things don't seem to be anywhere close to these lists anymore, right? And now let's talk about the media. The media's narrative is always to mock success, mock progress. It's a very Marxist media globally now that is the mainstream. And they keep harassing tech companies saying you're overvalued or you only talk valuation. But something silent has happened on profits as well. Look at the table on the right, on the left. Slowly, more and more tech companies are also the most profitable companies in the world. Apple throws out $100 billion of cash. $100 billion is more than the valuation of Infosys. They spit out an entire Infosys every year in cash, not market cap, cash, profit after tax. Now this is scary. What do you do with that much cash? Right? And increasingly, the next companies coming onto this most profitable leaderboard are going to be more tech companies, not non-tech companies. In fact, you'll see two Chinese companies there, both are banks. For both, it's hard to believe their numbers. So if you remove them, the next two companies competing to get on this list are both tech companies. And as these companies become scarier, larger, more monopolistic, some countries are benefiting more than others, and especially one. The US now runs the world's cloud. The US has more data centers than the rest of the world, rest of the next 9 combined. What is the US storing so much on data centers? It's your data, right? Your WhatsApp, your Instagram, your Snapchat, your SMSs. If you're using iOS or Android, both are American companies. You have no choice. All of your usage data, all of your analytics, all of your Gmail, every single thing about your life is now on a US cloud somewhere available to President Biden or President Trump at his whim and fancy. We can't go to court in the US. We are called non-resident aliens in the United States. We have no Supreme Court protection. So we are now bonded labor in this digital world that is run by these companies, and specifically hosted in one country. And what happened to the other global powers? You remember World War I, World War II, all of us read about this. There weren't really world wars, there were more European wars, more of Europe's problems becoming the world's problems, as is very natural for them. What is Europe doing to compete? All they can do is fine these big American companies every year, another 100 million euros fine, another 300 million euros fine. That's all we can see from Europe as far as the headlines are concerned. And you can even see on the world's most frequented websites, there's only one European website, it's all the way in the bottom, you'll have to help yourself and read it yourself. So what inevitably is happening is that these tech companies are no longer single product companies. Apple is no longer just selling you a phone or a laptop or a computer. It's one of the fastest issuers of credit cards in the US. It runs the world's biggest music store. It's trying to build its own car. It's trying to build robots for your house. Alphabet, now literally an alphabet conglomerate, used to be just a search engine, now building self-driving cars, biotech companies. They've rebuilt an entire Reliance Jio, their own cellular network called Google Fi, very silently in the US. And Amazon, of course, the prototype of a company trying to do everything from books to shoes, now robots, now an automatic door lock that opens without your permission to let the delivery boy in, so you can leave the package inside your house. So it's becoming scary how wide these companies go and how little room they leave for founders like you to compete with. And remember, all of them are throwing out 30, 40, 50, 100 billion dollars of cash every year, right? So if you're proud about your 2 million, 3 million, 5 million valuation, it means nothing to them. And that's why when you look at these companies, what has happened, and this is not an accident, this is not something that happened without them wanting it to happen, this is not without government support, this is not without active economic collusion. What we are living in is the new American empire. And there's a coordinated capture of your digital day, where on every single technology stack, you see either a monopoly or a duopoly, as you see on the screen. No Chinese companies, no British companies, no German companies, no Japanese companies, of course, no Indian companies, no Brazilian companies, no Canadian companies. So this is a scary, scary world, and we're already here. And it leaves very little room as you think about what to do next, especially if you're young and you're in college or just graduated. But remember, I asked you to wear your investor hat, and now I have a question for you. Why don't you own all these stocks? How many of you own these stocks, rather? Very few hands will go up. Right? I own all of them, even companies I don't like, frankly. But inevitably, as these companies get bigger, scarier, better at what they do, which is take over your life, their stock price does not stop going up. Right? So I present to you the first truth about the tech world we are living in. Difficult companies to be customers of, great stocks to own. Both is true. And so you can feel sorry for yourself, you can worry about this, or you can say, let me be a smart investor, it's happening anyway. Apple at 3 trillion should go to 10 trillion in the next 20 years. Buy the Apple stock and rest peacefully at home. And as these companies become bigger and bigger, they're spending more money to maintain their monopolies. It's becoming harder to compete with them. All of you would have seen these news articles every year. Every year, Zuckerberg goes to that Senate hearing. Every year, some uncle, 90-year-old uncle asks him questions about what does Facebook do and what is happening to my data and why are kids being terrorized on Facebook and so on. He'll answer something that fellow doesn't understand. Nothing changes. No laws are passed. No one goes to jail. Only more fines. They don't care. It's another 100 million with a 10 billion balance sheet anyway. everyone moves on, right? So the media also lies to you. The media tells you, pretends like something happened, but nothing happened. Nothing changed. Zuckerberg is still worth $100 billion, and life moves on. And these monopolies now are no longer just American companies or British companies or whatever. They are global companies. Borders don't stop them, right? Germany's YouTube is YouTube. The UK's Android is Android. Japan's Google is Google. India's Android is Android. India's WhatsApp is WhatsApp. Even when we tried to build a competitor, we failed miserably. Just like every other country in the world has failed, so we're not unique in that sense. So now we're living in this expansionist monopoly era. And it looks scary, but I want to bring your attention now to this very interesting company called Airbnb, right? For every big, scary company like I showed you in those last 7, 8 slides, there's this strange and weird company like Airbnb, which over the last 11 years has become the world's biggest hotel company without building a single hotel room. Think about that for a moment, right? What do you go on Airbnb to do? You go there to book a room, you want to stay in Delhi, you want to stay in Goa, whatever, right? That's one of the many options you use. But they didn't build a single hotel. They didn't build a single hotel room. They made your spare bedroom, someone's spare house, someone's spare apartment complex available as inventory to anyone who's traveling to those cities and towns, right? So every time someone like me stands on a stage and tells you it's over and it's becoming grim and it's becoming difficult, remember Airbnb. And remember the next dozen stories I'm going to tell you. For every time it looks like something is running out of ideas and it's over and there's nothing left, there's no room, no oxygen, we're all in danger. You can still think of something like this, and you'll find some company somewhere is always innovating. There's always some new dimension of value creation that you can tap into, right? So there's always hope. And I'll show you now why India is going to be that big theater of hope going forward. And finally, of course, the only thing you have to be a little concerned about is now the domain expertise needed to build the next Airbnb, right? And for example, if you want to build an operating system without building an operating system, right? Maybe there'll be an AI-led operating system that suddenly competes with Amazon and iOS and Android for your attention on that digital day slide. It's going to be really difficult to build that AI thing, right? You need to be a much more domain expert-oriented person. You can't be a generalist. You can't be a B undergrad pass out. You have to be some kind of advanced master's, PhD, etc., etc. So the future technologies and the tools that are going to be used to build the next Airbnbs are getting more complicated. That is the only thing you have to worry about, right? And of course, it makes it for exciting competition. And that's where the action is going to shift in the next 10 years. So now I'll show you a few more very real examples of how this is impacting your day every day. So we spoke about Airbnb. Airbnb's inventory is equal to the next 5 largest hotel groups combined. Right? Again, remember, they didn't build a single hotel room. This is scary, and their valuation is now 90 billion. It's a stock you should own. All of you should be checking your brokerage apps as I speak. If you don't own this stock, you should ask yourself, why don't you? Right? And why do you own Marriott or IHG instead? How many people here use Spotify? A lot of people should put their hands up now. So I asked this question, I've been asking this question everywhere I go since 2017. In 2017, maybe one person used to put their hand up in a room this big, right? Every year I see more and more people putting up their hands, and more of the people putting up their hands are now paying for Spotify. Remember, Spotify used to be free, right? And Spotify used to be this, okay, I'll try it. What is there, right? No harm. But all of you will think back, last 6, 7 years, 3 years, 2 years, even 1 year that you've been using Spotify. Every time you open Spotify, it gets a little bit better at giving you a new song that you like a little bit more, right? It makes automatic playlists. It tells you someone launched a new song. It gives you some other genre of song that you didn't know you liked, but it turns out you like it and you listen to it more. And then Spotify will tell you 4, 5 months later, hey, by the way, it's 99 rupees off, Diwali offer, 6 months of Spotify, paid Spotify, only 99 rupees. Of course you'll say yes, what is that? Now they do UPI, 2 buttons will pay, simple. Then 6 months later, 99 rupees for 3 months. It's good, nothing, 99 rupees, nothing, you paid. Slowly it becomes 99 rupees per month. And many of you are paying that now. I think it's 89 rupees per month now, right? So you went from this chindi Indian who doesn't pay for anything, free MP3s, YouTube, etc. Remember all the allegations these people tell us, right? I grew up in that environment. Everything was free, everything is pirated, supposedly. We've gone from that attitude to suddenly now we're paying 89 rupees a month for an app we didn't even think about using actively a year or 2 back. How is that happening? It's not an accident. They're using something called autonomous AI, AAI, to con all of us into becoming part of a funnel that converts more and more people to paying them every year. And they've gone to now 441 million paying users worldwide. I think it's more now. Last quarter was very good news. So this is happening to you in real time, right? This is happening to you in behaviors you thought you'll never change. Now, YouTube Premium. All of you are feeling the heat a little bit. Too many ads. Premium looks suddenly very appealing, or 89 rupees, 79 rupees, whatever it is. Okay, right? Every single company is going to start using AI to do this to you. And let's talk about another very hard company, Foxconn. Very well-known company globally. It took 100 million Chinese girls from villages on the west of China and moved them to the east of China and put them all into factories. And all of them use their arms and their minds and their fingers to assemble millions and millions of electronics for the whole world. China exports $3.5 trillion of goods every year. India exports 0.8 trillion, so it's almost 4 times what India manufactures, right? And now these women, of course, they learned over the last 20 years that life is hard working on a plant floor like that. They don't get they want vacation, they want babies, they want to become mothers, they want to go home, they want to eat food, they want to watch entertainment. Many of them are jumping off the roof. They have safety nets to prevent suicide. So it became a little difficult for Foxconn to manage all these employees. So what have they been doing since COVID? Every year, 50,000 women are losing their job as more and more Fox bots replace them on the assembly chain. Robots don't need permission, don't need vacation. Robots don't need maternity leave. Robots don't complain. And more, we're seeing suddenly Foxconn doesn't need as many people as it used to make the same output. And you remember a few years back, Foxconn moved to India. They started their first plant in the south of India. They eventually think one of those plants is now owned by Tata. For 100 units of work, if they used 100 human beings in China, now for 100 units of work, they're using 40 people in India. So this manufacturing, this advanced manufacturing is not even going to create as many jobs as we're all told by the media and the government that it may. Right? So now we're going to some uncomfortable territory, that even manufacturing jobs may not look the same anymore. And as companies move their supply chains out of China, we're seeing that this lack of the same job intensity is happening across industries. Shoes, again, you need Vietnamese women, small girls, tiny fingers to weave these shoes fast. Suddenly with 3D printing and global design, you don't need as many human beings in the supply chain anymore. All of you have got a WhatsApp forward with that cute robot running around acting like a dog. Don't believe that for a moment. All these robots are soldiers of the future. They're all being designed to fight the wars of tomorrow. And for every single time we will have a war with robots, we also need to protect human beings. So there needs to be Iron Man suits all of us one day will wear to fight against these silly robots. Again, I hope you're looking at the company logos. This is Boston Dynamics, owned by Google now, Alphabet. Raytheon, public company, very large defense company. Why don't you own both these stocks? Please finance both sides of the war. Be the new Medicis. Right? So don't forget, I asked you to wear your investor hat, right? Please don't forget. I know this is scary stuff. It sounds strange. You're worried about your children now, but please buy the stocks. Please look at them, study them. Please finance, be smart, finance both sides of the war. And these robots are going to be everywhere. They're going to be pets in our house, surveying what we buy and who comes and goes in our house. That Amazon robot is not a dog. It's a surveillance robot. Never trust it. These Tesla robots doing yoga, absurd. And Korea, of course, interesting population issue. You may have seen in the news recently, Korea's birth rate is now 0.51. Replacement rate is 2. 2 people need to have at least 2 human beings to have replacement rate in the country. Now they're at a quarter of what they need to be, so there are not enough new boys and girls being born every year. And that means there will be less human labor, less people at home, less people who cook, less people who clean, less people who even eat. And more robots will take over empty human activity. And of course, Samsung's very happy to build those robots and sell it to them as their population goes to zero. And some countries, especially in Europe, cannot build Aadhaar, cannot build UPI. They're struggling with basic concepts of identity and how to do this for their populations. So they will move to the next logical thing for them. They'll try to put a chip in everyone's hand, force you to have a chip that goes with you everywhere so that you are force identified. So even the same things that we do here with Aadhaar, UPI, etc., India's picked a certain path. All of these are non-profits. All of these are run with public-private partnerships. There will be no monopolies in these India stack use cases. In other countries, it may not be the same. It may be something more extreme. It may be something more owned by corporate interests. So even the same end use will not be the same look in different countries in the world. And of course, Musk is famous for many things, including getting a US president elected. He's secretly building this company called Neuralink, which puts a chip in your brain and then lets you control a machine. You've seen paraplegics now being able to control their wheelchairs, robotic wheelchairs in real time, with real-time thinking. What we don't know is this bidirectional, right? Can the machine send signals back? Can it manipulate your thinking? We don't know. But if this company ever goes IPO, please remember this company's name. It's a stock you should own. And finally, of course, making babies, the most human of all activity. How can any tech get into this, you'll be asking. But recently, I think 3 years back, one of China's scientists announced that they have 300 CRISPR babies in China, where they have removed undesirable traits from these babies. Now, we don't know what undesirable means to a Chinese scientist. We don't know what traits they removed. We don't know what traits they can engineer. Just remember that if they say 300, it's probably 30,000. China always lies. So if even this is now no longer in our control, how much sooner before you can now pick the color of your baby's eyes, the IQ it has, the vaccinations it has before it's born, and so on and so forth, right? So, sorry, I think we've lost connectivity. All right. So how far could this go in 25 years? Now, again, investor hat. Please remember, you're getting too silent for my comfort. So investor hat, please. These are all stocks you should buy or can buy soon. Imagine a future now where energy is free, right? This is a photo of the first nuclear fusion reactor, scale nuclear fusion boiler reactor to go live. It's in Paris. If it goes live next year or maybe a year after, it will have the potential through nuclear fusion, not fission, no radioactive material is made, to power the entire city of Paris, right? Imagine now if we minify this, we have mini fusion reactors, every city can have its own backup, maybe 2, and suddenly nuclear hazards are not a problem anymore. So in 10 to 15 years, you could see suddenly we'll have surplus electricity, surplus energy, right? And of course, the world's largest solar farm is already in India. That's in Bhadla, Rajasthan. We should be proud of it. 2.7 gigawatts, it's huge, bigger than China. And India is also making incredible progress towards electrifying itself and creating surplus energy. So a future where energy is free, suddenly a lot of the things you are concerned about, leaving the heater on too much, AC on, fan on, all these things your mother whined and complained about every day about your bad behaviors, suddenly don't mean anything anymore, right? But it also removes corporate constraints. A university this large has to have 2 power backups, DG, transmission, voltage, management, power backup. Data centers, all of them have to go renewable. They're all crying about electricity costs. Suddenly, all those constraints are gone. Right? Bitcoin mining will be cheap. Will be zero. The cheapest it'll ever be. Right. So the second order consequences of this, the third order consequences of this, give you infinite ideas on what to monetize. Imagine a future where one of the most important constraints on us, our own expertise and time, that is no longer a constraint. Imagine if expertise is free. Every child will have a personal tutor, every mother will have a personal nurse, personal doctor, every man will have a personal lawyer, personal travel agent. And all these things are autonomous AI negotiating on your behalf 24/7. Right? This entire industry is being built as we speak. All of you are looking at those AI chatbots in real time. But this is very quickly going to be all around us, on our phones, on our earpods, on our laptops, on the internet, representing us autonomously. And then imagine human labor is free, is out of the equation. It's already happening, right? I spoke about those robots. More of them will clean your house and do the things you don't want to do. But also now, because South Korea is running out of people and human labor, now they need construction robots to lay cement, build skyscrapers, and they're becoming increasingly better and more efficient than human labor. Imagine travel is faster and autonomous. That's Boeing's Mark 5 passenger prototype. On the right, you'll see Volkswagen's EV autonomous cab business. It's already live in parts of Germany. Suddenly, we don't need as many drivers, and these jobs are increasingly going to go away. Right? You may not even need to own a car in the next 10 years. Then imagine the skills constraint going away. Today, for most of you, it's hard to talk to a computer, right? You're forced to use it through apps. You can't write your own code, you can't write your own apps. Even using apps, it becomes a problem. Which button is taking too long, etc., etc. But imagine now that you can instruct your phone in whatever language you speak, and it will write programs for you, unique scripts for you, and you become a programmer by just talking in human language without needing to write a single line of code. Imagine all the things you can do for yourself, and imagine the barriers of entrepreneurship and product development fundamentally going away. And then imagine today there are 5 billion people on the internet. I showed you that slide before. Imagine now if everyone has AI agents representing them, there'll be 100 billion AI agents on the internet in the next 20 years. 100 billion AI agents will be an overcrowding of the internet. It'll be rare to run into another human being anymore, right? And of course, with so many AIs running around, imagine all the sophisticated hacking that starts on us. There'll be a lot of good AI, there'll also be a lot of bad AI. That's almost always the case. And now we'll need even more sophisticated AI to protect us from AI that's trying to hack us, so this becomes another weird industry that starts feeding on itself. And all of you have heard of quantum computing. Something scary that's happened. I sat in a speech by the head of technology at JP Morgan, which is the largest bank in the world, and he told all of us in a closed room that the Chinese and Iranian hackers have already stolen 150 million bank account username and passwords from American banks. The only thing they can't do is they can't decrypt them because they're all hashed and encrypted. It takes hundreds of years to break that SSH encryption, so they're secure for the time being. But what quantum computing is promising to do is through qubits and quantum mathematics, you can decrypt even the harshest algorithms in 1,000th the time. So a few days instead of hundreds of years. Now, when we asked him, are you sure this thing will actually decrypt and are you sure this is going to happen? He said, yes, I'm sure. They already have it. It's just a matter of time till they own a quantum computer and then they decrypt all of it. So then someone in the room asked him, so what does it mean for all of us? He said, extinction. Suddenly our bank accounts are not protected. Anyone can walk into your bank account pretending they're you and leave with whatever money you think you own. Scary stuff, and this is happening in real time as we speak. These are the CTOs, the CIOs of the world's biggest banks sweating and trying to retire early because they don't want to be the last guy in the job when this is happening. And of course, I mentioned this, wars will be fought by robots. It's already a live Iron Man suit patrolling the border between North and South Korea. Creators and gamers will be AI first. This is first AI anchor in Kannada News. He goes on Saturday, today evening. I forget which channel, but all of you are welcome to tune in. On the right, that's a game called Fortnite. Many of you will know Fortnite. Again, it's free for now. Right? Now you should catch on. And I'll tell you also, I'll guess how they will monetize. Today, when you go on Fortnite, you're playing another human being, right? You're shooting at someone, they're shooting at you, whatever. It's supposed to be fun, but at least it's another human being. Imagine a future Fortnite very quickly, possibly next year. Most of the people around you are bots. They're not human beings. And bots are very good at gaming. If you've seen bots gaming, very good at chess, very good at everything now. So the moment you land in a parachute and you have a gun, suddenly 20 bots have shot at you already, right? Like there's no way you survive. So you'll have to pay Fortnite for the privilege to play another human being. Very simple monetization, right? Of course you want to play against human beings. Who wants to play against bots? So now that you know this Spotify hack, suddenly everything around you, you will start seeing an unpeeling, strategies being used to take more out of your wallet before some crypto hacker takes everything. And I spoke about the neural link. Imagine 10 to 15 years, more and more human beings are hyper-connected into brain-machine interfaces and speaking to machines both ways in real time. We'll have high-fidelity physics simulations. Suddenly that Matrix movie all of you have grown up watching is not very far away, right? Of course, now positive things are also happening. Suddenly, a very personalized cancer diagnosis that takes care of your specific genetic makeup and your specific pancreatic cancer variant, now suddenly solving even cancer is not going to be as difficult as it used to be even 5 years back. And very precise surgery, laser surgery, guided surgery, and so on will be run by scary-looking, stabby robots like that. Hopefully, they don't take their eye off the needle when they're doing laser surgery on you. And finally, of course, the most important of all things, ask any billionaire what is left for you in the world, what is most important. He will say, I want more time. He's willing to give $1 billion for another 2 years of a healthy existence. So imagine if tech will now remove all these undesirable traits, extend your telomeres, 3D print your organs, so multiple liver failures, no problem, keep drinking. And it'll keep printing livers for you. And the natural lifespan of a human being is 120 years by our genetic strand diversity, the telomeres and so on. So that is most probably going to be a new subscription product by Apple or Google sometime soon, live till 120. Right, let's see how much they price it at. So what we're going towards is this combinatorial singularity. All these technologies on the left, some you heard of, some sound very new, science fiction-y. They're going to make all these different sectors converge into a very scary future. But all of these are technologies being built by companies today whose stocks you can own. So I remind you again, you're an investor, please buy these companies. So now coming to India, and it's very, very positive here because all this AI doom and gloom stuff is happening in the rest of the world. They're running out of ideas. All of this is very negative for them. But I want to bring you into now our reality and why we are excited as investors in India. Look at 1991, $275 billion of GDP. Today we are at 3.7 trillion. We're the only country in the world that has compounded at 13% in our currency over 33 years and gone from this economy that was running out of money, total disaster, bad leadership, 50 years of failed socialism. And since we opened up just a little bit, and every year we open up a little bit more, we've been unleashing our very basic potential and compounding at 13% a year. It doesn't feel like 13% a year. Most of you will say it definitely can't be 13, must be less. But 13 is what the data tells us, right? 8% in dollars. The only country that's done this before for this long is China. Right? So the comparison between India and China is real. In fact, we're not very far away. China is still 20 trillion, we are still 5 trillion, so it's 4 trillion, sorry. There's a large gap because they started much earlier. But rest assured that this latent potential, it's not going anywhere. It's ours, we own it, it works for us. It's something we must harness and something we must never allow anyone else to take away from us again, even our own government. And if you look forward the next 10 to 15 years, we're the only country in the world that is projected to go past 5 trillion in the next 4 to 5 years and past 10 trillion in the next 50 years. Only two countries have passed 10 trillion, US and China, will be the third. No Japan, no Germany, I don't want to say anything about UK, sorry Chandru. No France, no Brazil, no Canada is a joke. No hope. Right, so AI will crush those economies. Of course, they're running out of people, so it'll be a substitution and so on. It'll feel like it's the right thing to do. But the energy, the latent energy of the entire species is going to move to the top three, right? And as that shift happens, it will feel like it's not happening. All of you will be, living this every day, feeling it every day. You haven't felt it for the last 20, 32 years. Why will you feel it now? Is a very basic question. But you're seeing now in real time, if you're looking at the markets, again, markets, voting mechanism, remember, the logic stays the same in India. We are now the fourth largest equity market in the world. We just passed 5 trillion. We beat Hong Kong earlier this year. Japan's not too far away. It'll be some fight to go past China. It'll take some time, but third is now going to be a very natural position for us. You see that in all my slides going forward. And interestingly, the household composition on the right, from 2015 to 2024, we have, in 9 years, we've gone more than double in how much contribution every household is giving to the equity and mutual fund market. And that's why the wealth creation happening everywhere. Record Mercedes-Benz sale, record BMW sale, record Cartier sale, record Tanishq sales, record some Amrut Scotch sales, right? Where is the money coming from to all these records being broken every year? It's coming from equity, it's coming from real estate being sold, it's coming from households becoming smarter about their money and saying, I only live once. It's good, YOLO. Let's buy, let's enjoy ourselves, right? And the wealth now is permeating down. Every layer of society is now having a new ambition for itself, that I should live a more prosperous life, right? So once the equity story starts, you see it becoming this very virtuous, large feedback loop. And if you have a young population when that loop has started, you cannot ask for more blessings from whatever divinity you pray to. Because every other country that had this happening, US in the 80s, China in the 2000s, they were already a middle-aged country. They were past 30, 35. We are the only country in the world that this is happening to, and we're still sub 30 in our median age. Right? And we'll have a young population for the next 100 years, so not too much to worry about. But the only thing that could have become a big problem is, remember, we're still a Marxist country, socialism, etc. It's in the constitution. The priority for this government is always to tax you more and give it to someone else who never seems to run out of the need for more money, right? I'm not saying that's wrong. I'm saying it feels unfair to all of you in the room. And it's a valid sentiment to have. But what we've done in the last 10 years is, actually I'll run a poll. How many of you, put your hands up, how many of you believe the extreme poverty rate in India is 40%? 40% of our people are in extreme poverty. Okay, a few hands. Look around, okay, look around. You should all see this experiment in real time. How many of you believe 30%? Extreme poverty. UN has defined extreme poverty. 30%, few hands good. 20%? Lot more hands, please see, lot more hands. 10%? Okay. 5 to 10%? Okay, less than 5%. one bold, one, two, three very courageous people. These three are right. India's extreme poverty rate is 2.2% now. We were 19.8% 10 years back. Right? Big achievement, of course, we should be happy. But it makes me a little angry to say it took 10 years to go 10x down, almost 10x we reduced, right? 20 to 2.2. What the hell were we doing for the last 20, 30, 40 years? What were we doing? If it was possible in 10 years, why didn't it happen before? Right? And suddenly the questions you're asking about why these companies own our day, why I only have 2 operating systems, which stocks do I own? Right? Now ask these questions about your life here. Right? If it was possible, why didn't it happen? Simple question. And as we ask those questions and now we think about what we do every day with our money, with our time, where we devote our attention, right? Remember that digitalization is happening faster in India. So all the numbers in India look even healthier than the rest of the world. We're on this internet highway. All of you have seen the Geo, UPI, Aadhaar phenomenon. I don't have to say all this to you. We're competing the rest of the world, and I'll go through all this a little bit quickly. But now we come to startups. And remember, investor hat still, right? It's a long journey to this, but investor hat still. We're already the 3rd largest startup ecosystem in the world. So number 3 becomes natural to us in almost everything. We created 127,000, so 1,27,000 startups, $500 billion of value already. That's 1/8 of the GDP. Very soon will become 1/5. Bangalore is blessed. It's the number 1 startup economy of the country. 45% of the money invested comes to Bangalore. It's blessed by the largest number of unicorns, the largest number of soonicorns. So just being in Bangalore means you're in the zone of luck, right? As they call it, right place, right time. And of course, Bangalore owes a lot to the IT companies. Without what they've done for the last 35 years, from that Marxist regime to post-Marxism and this new socialism, whatever we have now, they've paid taxes, they've faced penalties, they've had to suffer 10 years to get an electricity connection in Electronic City. So they've been through all that pain, right? And all of you have seen the news. So some of you may be shareholders of Infosys, Wipro, TCS, etc. So you've already benefited from their success. But they've trained 55 lakh people in IT. This is the 2nd largest IT talent force in the world, only second to the US. That is the energy with which these startups build, right? That's the only reason why these startups have become so successful. There's a template of Indian software going global every year. And what these IT companies have done is they export $200 to $220 billion of software every year. That's $220 billion of dollars that comes in, right? It's the largest export industry we have in India. That over 30 years, as it compounds, has meant India now exports more software than Saudi Arabia exports oil. This has become our single largest economic advantage today in 2024 compared to all the other industries that we have succeeding in India in parallel. And that's why this convergence, So that's why this convergence that we're living through now is finally in front of us. It's done, right? We have 5th largest economy in GDP, nominal GDP, but in PPP terms, we're already 13 trillion, we're the 3rd largest. Consumption is 60% of GDP. We have fantastic IT companies, they go global. 5 out of the top 10 and 3 out of the top 5 global IT companies are now Indian. They've trained lakhs of people, we're the 2nd largest IT talent base, over 1 lakh startups. And finally, 800 million Indians are on the internet. 1.2 billion mobile connections, 800 million smartphone users. Finally, we're all connected, and all of us can talk to each other, right? And AI is coming at this time now, so we'll even be able to translate in real time. So what this means now is there's no excuse, right? Young population, convergence, reasonably efficient government getting its act together slowly, hopefully reducing tax. But now, this next 10 years of growth, as we go from 4 trillion to 8 trillion, that graph I showed you, and we become the 3rd largest, it will never come back again. When I was in school, I remember the Prime Minister back then telling us in a speech that India should not have an aspiration to be a top 10 global GDP on the list. We should not be a top 10 country. Why should we have the aspiration? I'm quoting him. I have that quote in my laptop. I see it once a week. Right? It's very disappointing to be a 9th standard kid. You don't even know what GDP means. But you're being told by this guy who's your Prime Minister that it means nothing to have the aspiration. Right? In those 10 years, we went from 12th to 11th. The next 10 years, we've gone from 11th to 5th. If that was possible, why didn't it happen sooner? So these questions now of urgency, because all of you will feel a little angry with what I'm saying. Good. Motivate. That's a good motivation. Use it. The next 10 years is a doubling that is the last doubling of our life. When I was in school, we were sub $1 trillion. When I was in college, we became 2, and now middle of my career, we are almost 4. I've been through 3 doublings just in me going from school to 35 years old today, right? Many of you are older than me in this room, many of you are younger. But the next doubling from 4 to 8 is the last doubling all of us will go through. From 8 to 16, very difficult, large base, won't have the same government, different systems are possible, no certainty. So this doubling is the last chance for all of us to get what is owed to us. And I think that's how, if you think that way, if you become more aggressive, suddenly expansionist, monopoly, AI, whatever, doesn't matter, right? We figure out a way. All of us can build Airbnbs. And that's why when you see these founders now, when you see the news about them, and that's why I said what I said before this slide. Today we have 115 unicorns. Another poll. Some of you have been through this before. How many believe all these 115 unicorns deserve to be unicorns today, in November 2024? Anyone believes 115 unicorns, all of them deserve to be unicorns? Even one person? One very courageous person. Very good. Okay, 100 of them. 100? 75? Okay, a little bit more. 50? Less than half? 50? Few more? Less than 25? Okay. So that's disappointing. I mean, you should be proud of these companies. Many of them are now stocks you can own. Some like Paytm you should not buy, but others are stocks you should own. I've had the good opportunity to meet a lot of them as I've built out my career in venture capital. I'm grateful to have partnered with a few of these unicorns also in our portfolio. I've seen them when they were 2 guys in a laptop, very young. I've seen them when they were 100 million valuation, a little bit more energy. I've seen them in $1 billion, very egotistic, all of them. I've seen some of them fall from $1 billion, that ego is gone. I've seen many of them go IPO, the ego is back. I've seen them all go through changes, and there's a lot of different variants in these founders. They're not all the same community, not all the same city, not all the same type of degree, not all engineers, not all lawyers, not all CAs. There's a very little in common with all of them, right? But one thing is common, especially when I meet them in person and see it in their eyes. Not a single one of them cares for your opinion. So the hands you put up or you didn't put up, even if they stand here and do this, they will just pretend they care. They don't care. If they made it to $1 billion, they made it. In their head, in their eyes, you'll see it. There's an animal energy that you'll never steal from them. If they went to $1 billion and it became 0 for whatever reason, that's happened to a lot of them, they still don't care. They'll try to do it again, right? I see in these young men and women something I never saw when I was in school, when I was in college, in the people around me. I see this fire that you can't put out, right? And that anger, that motivation, whatever it is, different people have different emotional motivations. And they all have victim stories. I went through this. Everyone has that. It's good. Use it. But that courage to not give up, I think that is the single most important thing I have noticed and what I look for when I meet the next set of entrepreneurs we meet every day and the companies who are pitching to us. And it's not just Indians in India making all these unicorns. We are the largest demographic building unicorns in the US. We've beaten the Israelis, we've beaten the British, we've beaten the Germans, the Japanese, the Chinese. So we're the single largest, most successful demographic in our diaspora as well. Indians are not only starting companies and becoming wealthy, they're also running the world's largest companies. They didn't start any of these, but they're running them as CEOs and so on, and they're becoming incredibly wealthy. I was shocked to hear something recently that in the S&P 500, the 500 most valuable companies on that index, all 500 companies for the first time in history have one board member that's Indian. Right? Massive. The only country that has that before us is American, because I think 480 of the 500 are American companies. But that's a massive achievement. I didn't know this. Right? I didn't even thinking about that. But it's fascinating to see that quietly, no big show, no big parades, we don't make too much noise. These people go home 9 to 5, do their job, right? Don't disrupt their community, don't say silly things on the news. But what we've done as a diaspora should tell us that this is always possible for us. The latent potential I spoke about earlier, just give us the opportunity or get out of the way and see what we'll do. Right? So now you're running out of excuses. You don't have to leave the country to do this. That's also the point. And the next slide there should tell you something interesting. There are now almost 200 billionaires in India. We're already the third largest in the world. Right now, I think the US and China are going to flip soon. China is going through some pain. Next question. How many of you, not how many of you, but hands up, I'll take 4 or 5 answers. Which industry has created the most billionaires in India? If you already know if you've seen me ask this before, please don't answer. It's a fun exercise. Yes. Tech, no. No, sir. Sorry? Sorry? Fintech, no. You. Auto, no. Consumer, no. So for now it's 51 billionaires. Education. Right? So I think someone said education. So now something strange about education, right? It's a weird business if you think about it. All of us went through it, so we're all customers. Some of us are now customers for the second time because if you look at the education business model, the user and the customer are two different human beings. It's the only industry where you see this divergence, right? The user is the student, the child, your son or daughter. And the payer, the customer is the parent, right? So all the university marketing is to the parent. Placement, job, Izzat, Auqat, whatever. I don't speak Hindi, but all these very fancy words, right? And if you see the student's experience is not that very nice. The bathroom's a little bit too smelly, the dorm's a little bit too small, the bed sheets are not clean, the food is boring, same every day. This is a nice place. Of course, the owner of this university also is a billionaire many times over, a great guy, right? Good friend of mine, so I can joke about him. But 51 billionaires in India own a university, right? Another very interesting thing about this business in India, and I come back to that Marxist root of us, not a single one of them is public. Think about it. I can't buy Manipal University shares. I'm a little upset. It's a great stock to own. It feeds this weird hope complex between parent and student, and it does a great job. They're wildly profitable. Right? That's why they can afford to give us this for free today. So this is another example of how the opportunities are going to come from all directions. Even the oldest industry, which is teaching our children something useful, is a massive opportunity to create immense wealth, but not yet for investors. Hopefully that changes. But again, think very wide about the opportunities. It's not going to be tech or auto or IT or pharma or chemicals or whatever. Not just the headlines. Think far and wide, right? And you'll see opportunity everywhere. So we're already number 3rd in unicorns. I'll go a little faster now. We have unicorns in every sector. So if you're a founder wondering where will I get funding, which sector should I start, the answer is all of the above. Right? Every sector is getting increased funding. There is honestly no sector left now that is not getting funded. Early stage investing is setting new records. So now what we're seeing is that the Indian economy is going to look very close to what China and the US went through over the last 20, 30 years. And we have to think a little differently now about India as we build forward. So this is more of a message to people who are already founders, promoters. Your old assumptions about India have to be updated and you have to change. And if you're not already public, why are you not a stock the rest of us can buy? Right? If you're going public, go faster because this window won't last very long. If you're not thinking about going public, you're too small, work with someone else, get acquired, merge in, build scale, please think about going public. Right? So the speakers after me will talk a lot about this. But in India now, fundamental things are changing. For example, look at the volume of payments. 72% by volume is now UPI. Right? Just think about what that means. Your driver, the watchman outside, the security guard, the maid, they used to all keep cash somewhere in a box in their house, keep the cash under the bed. It's cash for bribe, cash for rent, cash for grocery, cash for school, cash for this, cash for that. The cash makes no interest. And with inflation at 5 to 8% sometimes in India after 1991, it was absurd. The loot that's happened to the average Indian because of the need to keep cash at home because living is so difficult, right? Inflation crushed them. It's deeply unfair. But today, because we have UPI, that money stays in the bank account, right? I'm not saying that's why it stays in the bank account, but I'm saying it by nature it stays. And just imagine, so many more hundreds of millions of Indians now are on the right side of inflation. Hopefully the FD, they're in the right FD. There are wrong FDs. On the right FD, they're beating inflation, right? Or at least matching it. So a simple technology has had so many unintended second and third order consequences and changed how people live their life and dramatically helped them stay ahead of some of the things that afflict all of us. And this transition to no cash means when you look at now Indians as a population behaving in a scale that we've never behaved at before. Right? Let me give you the YouTube example. There are now almost 500 million Indians on YouTube. And many of them will start paying now, premium. All of you are going to pay for premium. I'll take that bet. And something interesting happened in 2013, 2014. Who in the room knows who PewDiePie is? Hands up. All the kids will know, right? Everyone my age will know. PewDiePie was this Norwegian, Swedish, I don't know, one of those weird countries, Scandinavian YouTuber. Very lanky, thin, weird-looking guy. Makes fun of everything, everyone. He's a joke channel back then. And he got into this fight with T-Series, which is now the world's #1 channel on YouTube. PewDiePie is still here, a few years back. So one guy won this PewDiePie kid, and then T-Series, which is a company, it puts out bhajans, Bollywood songs. All of you listen to T-Series, right? You don't think twice about T-Series. It's there. You search for some bhajan, it's there. So PewDiePie and T-Series were now at both at 80 or 90 million subscribers, and there was a race, a global race, to get to 100 first. Okay? Now, PewDiePie got desperate. PewDiePie went on a rampage. He's a little bit of a racist fellow in the end of it. He made fun of us. He made songs mocking our accent, mocking Indians, mocking the fact that we're listening to T-Series. All these teenagers, kids everywhere in all the other countries joined him, mocking us. They all made songs. They made TikTok wasn't around that time. Whatever was around that time. Vine was around that time. Yeah. And what happened was he had to appeal to all the kids all over the world. Please get your mother, take the phone, follow my channel. We have to beat T-Series. Right? So it was almost like this frenetic war. Like you've seen that Batman movie, The Joker, all those clowns around him. Yeah, that's what PewDiePie looked like to me. Right? In India, what happened? Did you get a single WhatsApp or headline or something saying all Indians must unite and do Akhand Bharat, we must save T-Series, a matter of Izzat? Nothing. Right? What do we do? Uncles and aunties listen to bhajans, kids listen to Bollywood. Life moves on, and we crushed PewDiePie. Honestly, we didn't even, by the way, most of you don't even know this happened, right? That's the point here. Just being normal, just behaving every day like we do, right? At this scale of population, we will cause lifetime scars for hundreds of millions of people who even dare to go up against the combined behavioral entity that is the Indian population. Right? Imagine what happens if we all come together. So there's some interesting population scale dynamics that is still to come. So I'll quickly go through the rest of the slides in the interest of time. So I spoke about large companies, large conglomerates. In India also now, our biggest companies are faced with the same question. It's existential. Right? Go extinct or sell to these companies or become one of them. And I'm very happy to say they've all answered saying we'll also become a conglomerate. Reliance is famously competing with everything now with its Geo universe. Tata is also silently, they don't make as much noise, but silently competing with everyone. You see that they have business in almost every sector now. And then there are these strange founders, right? Sridhar Vembu of Zoho famously has not raised any venture capital. It's a stock none of us can buy, even me. That's his board meeting. His board meeting is at a time he chooses in his village house in Tamil Nadu. If you don't want to come to his village, the board meeting happens without you. And he passes whatever he wants to pass, and he has to listen to no one. And I think he made around 3,000 crores of profits this year. Right? Fantastic. And of course, from our community, we must be very proud of these brothers. Zerodha, very famously, the bootstrap story, the kings of bootstrap, 4,500 crores of profit this year. Right? Unbelievable. The 14th most profitable company in India, I think. Again, they went up against maniacs. Those are very difficult companies to compete with. Right? And they won. And still very hard to buy their stock. So these founders now, I'm giving you live examples of Airbnbs happening as we speak, right? Vembu, the Kamath brothers. But even in my portfolio, 4 of our companies, the average age is 5.5 years. They're already at 100 million in annual revenue. The 100 million is 840 crores now, right? In 5.5 to 6 years, getting to 100 million revenue. When I invested in them, all of them were 2 boys in the laptop when I invested in them, or 3, whatever, founders, right? We didn't underwrite them going to 800 crores of annual revenue in 5 or 6 years. That sounds like a hallucination. But that's what has happened. And these guys don't stop. They keep compounding, they keep growing. They're able to raise money, they're able to compete against large, very competitive animals and win, right? And you see now the world's investors, best investors, they put money in Jio, they're putting money in Tata, they're putting money in our companies. And they're all working with these founders and building these companies and benefiting from the value being created. It takes now only 7 years to build a unicorn in India. It used to take 15. It takes less than 200 million to build a unicorn. It used to take $500 million. You dilute almost 80%. Right? And so now with these companies coming IPO, why don't you own these stocks? All these companies now are fueled by this ever-increasing cascade of private equity. 34 IPOs, I think, already tech-backed. All of them are available for you to buy. And surprisingly, they're all valued at 2.2x their Nifty peers because they grow 2.8 times more. Right? So the media always mocks their valuation again. But if you look at the fundamentals, you're paying for the growth. It's PEG, right? And it makes sense. And if you look at their performance now, we don't have a NASDAQ in India yet. We don't have that tech index. But look at the NASDAQ in yellow and look at the dark blue line, which is the Indian startup index. This is 31 companies when it was made. We've caught up, right? None of you own that index, but it's catching up. And so this $1 trillion of value that's going to be created, don't be left behind, right? Even if you're not starting these companies, you can't buy them in the private markets. When they go public, if they're reasonably priced, of course, don't just buy every IPO. If they're reasonably priced, use your minds, apply your judgment. These are stories you should benefit from. You should be part of the compounding, right? And I'll close by one last story. Sorry, Chandru, again, but my favorite example. Just 200 years back, we had our country run by a company, right? A very famous one. And I wish we could buy the stock, honestly. I'll tell you why. Yes, we were victims, of course. It sucked. And obviously, we have bad memories from this, of course. But I want to just zoom you out of your mind 1 minute and appreciate the ingenuity here. It's only 3 simple steps, right? The first thing they did is they went to all our producers. India was and is still a very highly productive, high yield economy. And they bought everything from the farmers at a price that the farmer thought was very good, right? Wow, they're coming to my farm and buying, I don't have to take it anywhere. Fantastic. Of course, I'll sell to them, right? But what the farmer didn't know is he could have got a better price from someone else. He could have gone to the market and checked. So there were these very increasingly monopolistic trade practices and how they started cornering the producers, eventually leaving them no choice but to sell to the company. But it started with very friendly pricing, right? Just like Spotify. Second, the moment you sell as a producer, 1 week later, these police people show up, the tax collector shows up in front of them, and suddenly you own 50% tax. And of course, they know you just made money because one of their buyers bought it from you. Right? 50% tax is more than what Aurangzeb tax was, by the way. So you see the exploitation, and then you need to borrow to buy seeds, you need to borrow for whatever farm investment you need to make. Of course, the same guy is going to lend to you. So suddenly you get trapped, right? So you see here collusion and usurious lending becoming a very obvious, simple business strategy. And maybe the most interesting thing they did is, if you manage to sell to someone else, say the Americans, the British, the Germans, the Japanese, we trade with the whole world, back then also, the company stopped Indian traders from getting gold in return for the goods they sold. So if an American buyer came to buy something from Bombay, he was required to give the gold to a British agent at the port, and then the Indian businessman would get something called a council bill, which is basically a fancy paper that I owe you money, right? So no gold. You're going to get paper in return. And if you want to go and exchange that paper later, guess which account of the East India Company is funding the paper? It's the tax collection account. So the Indian revenue account is funding Indian trade and business and being lent back to you at usurious rates, right? So in 3 simple steps, you build a company that takes $75 trillion of an entire country. It's incredible. Of course, it's horrible to be on this side of that equation. But 3 simple steps and you're the best stock you could have ever owned in history, right? Of course, this is now dismantled, it no longer exists. Now, ex-PM of UK, doctors are all the doctors are Indian, Indians are doing very well, Indian economy is bigger than the UK. Again, Chandru, sorry to pick on you, but it is my favorite example. Very obvious things that happened to us are now suddenly in the past. And these are all interesting stories. There are many, many more stories that we've been through. And that I come back to this point of the confidence, right? Whatever the motivation you have, whatever story you have in your personal life, whatever the reason you have to start a company, whether you build a Vembu, whether you build something else. Even this auntie from Udaipur, she went on Shark Tank, 4 crores worth of earthenware she sold in a week. Right? It's my favorite story. And entrepreneurs will come from all corners of the country, right? And they would have all gone through terrible stories, exploitation, etc. Of course, there's pain everywhere. But the fact that this is now happening at scale, and startups with their ESOPs, their IPOs and so on, you'll see the headlines, thousands of crorepati's being born every year. The whole ambition of the country is now leveled up, right? And I close by saying now India is a large country where population scale opportunities are still possible. This is the time it took for these technologies to get to 50 million users. Airlines took 68 years, iPod 4 years, YouTube 4 years, Facebook 3 years, Twitter 2 years, Pokemon Go 19 days. Arogya Setu is a public-private app. No company owns it. Some volunteers in Delhi and Bangalore built it. I know those guys personally. 50 million downloads in 13 days. And now it has 400 million users, right? And it became an essential service for all of us in COVID. So India may not allow us to profit from everything. Still true, education, Arogya Setu, etc. It's fine. It's the cost we pay, that's okay. Everything else is for profit, so we can buy those. But now this foundation is built and no one can steal it from us, right? This is the motivation I keep coming back to. It's essential that you don't miss the next doubling. You optimize for being a problem solver. This 10 trillion economy that's coming, startups will be a big part of it. SMEs will be a big part of it. So I invite all of you to join the other founders, the other entrepreneurs, Bangalore, the whole of India, in this once-in-a-generation leap forward. And I hope that all of us come out of this more prosperous and with better things to say about our future. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Pranav, for that energizing, power-packed session, and I'm sure we are all thankful to you for sharing the vision of $10 trillion GDP, which is certainty for Bharat. Let us remember, 30% of that 10 trillion is MSMEs. Yeah. And we should take that 30% and maybe increase the percentage beyond 30. On behalf of the organizers, I request SS Nayak and Siddharth to please come forward and felicitate Pranav. A quick one, please.